The Common Data Environment is a central hub which manages your project information. On all projects, there are a series of digital assets which represent the physical asset. These include drawings, documentation, reports, spreadsheets. There's a wide range of information being created, shared, and published. These digital assets are critical to development, construction, and maintenance of the physical asset. The management of these digital assets is what we call project information management, and that's critical to the success of the project, because on any given project, there's a wide range of receivers, or information receivers rather, and information creators who need to create, consume, share, collaborate with this digital information. To put it simply, it essentially comes down to the point in order to efficiently deliver the project, we need to provide access to all of our collaborators and team members on the project as effectively as possible. How I like to put it is that we need to provide the right people with the right access to the right information. And the platform which we deliver that on is what we call the Common Data Environment. Hi, my name's Mitch McPherson and I'm the National Sales Manager at 12D Synergy. Over the past 5 years, I've helped a wide range of consultants, contractors, surveying firms, local government departments, and other key members of the engineering and construction sectors establish common data environments right around Australia. And that's what we're talking about today, your common data environment within the context of the ISO 19650. This won't be an overview of the ISO 19650 standard, but there is a very good talk at the Tech Forum about that, so please feel free to watch that when you get the chance. So centralized management of all these key digital assets is essentially what we're calling the common data environment. Now, a key factor you might have noticed in my opening spiel is that there are a lot of external stakeholders, separate teams, delivery authorities, delivery partners, asset owners, contractors, and consultants, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on. So one of the key parts of your CDE is not just managing the work in progress data, it's also really important to manage the exchange of data through different teams and stakeholders as well. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's go through those different states that we use to track our exchange of data, if you will. Now, we refer to them as stages or states, and this is from PAS 1192, the Common Data Environment, which is still the standard that we run within ISO 19650. So those states are work in progress, shared, published, and archived. So if we break those down, firstly, let's look at the work in progress area. This is where digital assets are in development, both graphical and non-graphical information, including models, drawings, reports, and documentation that the team are actively working on. Developing data sets which information creators collaborate over within the work in progress state or area of the common data environment. This is the location. This is your engine room to your common data environment. So most 12D Synergy users are familiar with the idea of this. That's because you've probably adopted 12D Synergy as a work in progress common data environment. So you've got a lot of design models in there, 12D model projects, drawings, surveying data. All those are key examples of the type of digital assets which you've probably got in development at the moment in there. And they're being accessed by information creators, designers, drainage engineers, surveyors, and drafters. They're all working, checking in, checking out, managing revisions and versions in 12D Synergy. So what makes a good core WIP section of your WIP state of your CDE? What are your requirements? So some of the key features that drive a successful WIP area in your CDE is firstly, a central source of truth. This is the engine room, so everyone needs to know that's working in this area needs to know where the information that they need to do their job is. So a single platform that they can access that they know, I know my X data is here. From that, they're actively working on things, checking things in and out. We're not duplicating any data. We're not copying things to our C drive. It's a check-in, check-out system, single source of truth which then enables us to have version control and revision management. So all information creators know that they're working on the latest data sets and that they're getting their history and rollback. So all information creators have confidence that they're working on the latest information, they're working on the right information, and that they're avoiding rework as well, because there's a good QA process built in. You can roll back to previous versions if need be. You can also mentor junior staff, because getting that habit, no matter who you are, checking in multiple times a day for the purpose of backups, and then rolling back if you need be, managing your revisions with attribution as well. And then finally is the biggest one. And sometimes this gets overlooked until it's very late in the process and you have to find a solution fast. Compatibility with the information types you're actually using. So I mean that the CDE you are using is actually compatible with the data sets that you envision that you'll be managing in that. And that's key. And if you're in a scenario where a data set might not be compatible with the core CDE that you're using, the answer to that might be a WIP CDE or creating an ecosystem of CDEs. I'm sure a lot of you have seen a map drawn out of your common data environment, which include 3 or 4 different platforms. That's fairly common. And that's due to the wide range of data sets that are used in the AEC industry. So you might find that a single CDE doesn't provide a platform that meets all the requirements of your WIP stage. And it's typically always going to be the WIP state that forces this to happen. So although ISO 19650 or the iterations of that standard by different state departments or authorities around the country or around the world often don't necessarily mention separate CDEs as a solution to this, the practical scenario or the real world scenario is that you might find that you need to run multiple platforms, as many design and technical software packages, to be honest, best managed in their native platform or their native CDE. The vendor often writes one for them to fit those specific needs. So an example might be, you might be running another CDE just for your Revit users to collaborate, check in, check out. And those revisions are then exported or delivered from that WIP CDE to your core CDE when required. Alternatively, we've seen people using 12D Synergy to manage drawings and 12D model projects, and then that's delivered to a document management system, which is being used as a CDE as well. So it's really about your workflows and what works for you and adjusting to the requirements that you're coming up against as well. So I was mentioning a lot about a core CDE there in that ecosystem of CDEs. Your core CDE should be somewhat of an all-rounder, and I'm just going to take a moment to kind of talk about 12D Synergy as a core CDE. So there are a lot of businesses out there utilizing 12D Synergy as their core CDE, and they're managing things like their office integrations or applications, I should say, the AutoCAD family, including Civil 3D, Bricks CAD, and then we've got managed folder support, which is this is where we get some real flexibility. Any data set that is a folder of files, it's quite a technical project folder, we can manage that with managed folders. You can get your revision control and your version history, check in, check out at the folder level. And that's what managed folders is all about. And you'll see this with TwoFlow and XP Swim users. Another one to mention is if you're managing DGNs, you're a MicroStation user. If you want to know more about that, you can jump into a session with Richard Clark from Newcastle City Council. He goes over how their development in managing MicroStation and their DGNs with 12D Synergy has come about. Now, for surveyors, you're not forgotten. In fact, I have a WIP CDE overview for surveyors specifically, but if you're here, just quickly, we've got plugins available as we previously mentioned, but you'll find that 12D Synergy is a very flexible tool, so you can manage your surveying data in 12D Synergy, whether it be managed folder support for Trimble Business Center or Leica Infinity, or simply checking in and out list CAD files. You'll get your version control, your revision history, you'll get your rollback and all those sort of great things, and you can manage data in the states that are required as well. So that's the WIP state covered. Typically, next this information would go through some sort of approval process via a gate, and that gate would be assigned to someone they'd review and approve. And the next place in the next state in the CDE which it would go to would be the shared environment. So the shared state is where other teams on the project and key stakeholders who need access to information can consume the latest approved to share information that they require. Now, even though nothing has been approved for issue for construction, nothing has been formally delivered, it's simply shared. So you might share information with a client to review, you might share it with other parties or roles internally, you might share it between consultant and contractor, you might share it with the delivery authority. The key part of the shared stage is that there are many stakeholders accessing this information, and they can consume this information, but they cannot manipulate or change it. So best practice is people who are accessing information from a shared stage, they're just consuming it. If they need edits and updates made to any information they're consuming there, they need to return that to the WIP stage. And the best practice is that the information creator is always the one who creates those updates at the request of an approver or someone further down the line. So that's a key best practice piece of information, I guess, is that the shared state, we don't want people editing things there. Now, from that, in 12D Synergy version 5, this is where the shared state is likely where we're going to see our new feature, the collaborators licensing, come into play a little bit. So collaborators, although they don't take up a full paid seat in 12D Synergy, they will have the ability to access 12D Synergy folders defined by the administrator. So as you can imagine, a shared location within 12D Synergy where collaborators can access files, make some notes. This is quite an attractive method, I believe, in managing the shared state. So creating a shared state, maybe a client shared folder, people accessing that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later in the presentation. If you want to know more about collaborators in general and you've missed the version 5 overview, go back and watch that video when you get a chance. We'll talk more details there, or join our Q&A sessions. So the next stage following approved for issue would be then to go to the published state. So this is it's now approved or authorized. This information is information that has been approved issue for construction or approved at key intervals, i.e. milestone events. Here is a formal delivery of information, a package. This is where the end deliverable is sent, or your transmittals is sent, and it's suitable for things like suitable for tender, suitable for construction, and is approved and delivered. So teams, authorities, asset managers and owners, depending on which side of the design and construction phases you sit, either contractors or consultants, can now access finalised delivered digital assets. Teams that are relying on the delivery of a digital asset to be consumed within their own WIP projects, they can now consume this into their CDE and they can move it into their own WIP state, unless you're in a full design to construct design to construct CDE, in which case the commonly used method here from a 12D Synergy perspective would be internally publishing it to the contractor job for the surveyors to use, for example. Once they move that data into their own WIP state, kind of starts that process again. It goes back to WIP to shared to published, kind of loops around on their side of things. And finally, we then have archived. So essentially, this is where information is moved for future purpose, such as asset management, maintenance, and to be referred to for future developments and extensions. An example might be we've archived this information and we'll readdress it, we'll refer back to it for stage 2 and 3 of a subdivision maybe, or future development, a widening of a road. All of that information is then archived and you can bring back the data that had previously been created on that asset. And that's pretty much key to why ISO 19650 exists, utilising the information as best you can for the life of the asset. Now, one of the most important steps is your job folder structures. You need to develop one that works best for you and your processes, something that is common and repeatable, because people are most efficient when they are familiar with the environment they're working in. But it also has to meet the standards of the which are being set, the ones that you need to follow. So the example we have here is based off the Transport for New South Wales ISO 19650 folder or job structure. Now, you might find you need to make minor practical adjustments to the advised standard or practice being implemented. That's fine, as long as you can still achieve your core goals and as long as it is relatively common across your projects so everyone knows where things will be. An example we have here, shared and client shared. Two different shared state folders, because essentially in the practical rollout of 12D Synergy for this environment, you'd probably create permission pools for your client and collaborators and internal collaborators, so that your internal collaborators can just go to the shared state. The client shared, they can only access information that they have approval to access, which will be in the client shared folder. So there's a little practical application of why you might make some minor edits to your folder structures based off the standard that you're following. Now, approvals are the next key item that I'm going to talk to. So we've already talked about how you'll need to pass information through sign-off gates. So with 12D Synergy, this is where a lot of automation will come into play and will make the whole process as efficient as we possibly can. So information will need to be approved. It will need to be put into a state which corresponds with that level of approval, and it will need to be attributed to ensure you can see exactly where any piece of information is at a glance. So all of this requires input, but with 12D Synergy, our customers automate many of these steps using the workflow engine to drive their approval, automate their attribution and metadata updates, and even automate the delivery of the information, authorized for publish or to the shared state. By using something like, for example, SharedPoint as a shared environment, that's fine, but you might find some efficiency when things need to be moved back states. If everything's kept in the same CDE platform and we're providing access to everyone to that platform, if anything needs to be sent back, say, to the WIP state, we're not copying information back and forth between platforms. We're simply moving the same asset, digital asset, back to its WIP state. We can begin to work on the notes that you've provided or the changes that have been requested. So I guess a big part of that is ruling out the manual updates, emails, and communication. But this might actually make more sense if we look at a 12D Synergy ISO 19650 workflow. So here we see a common ISO 19650 workflow, which we've built in 12D Synergy. Different roles own each stage, and you can assign individual users to the role. So for example, if I get my mouse over here, the WIP stage, we have information creators who might have roles like the designer, and they'll continue to work on data until they trigger a review by moving that state to the approved to share. From here, an approver can either move it to shared, so yes, it's approved, let's go to shared, or they can send it back to work in progress. Now, from here, we can actually automate the attribution of that, or the increment the attributes associated to the different states. So if things need to be, the attribute needs to be updated to a shared state, we can attribute that. If it needs to go back to a work in progress, we can attribute that so people can say, this has actually gone to the approved to share state and it has not been approved previously. The attributes themselves, look, we can align that with your DEXP. If you've got a digital engineering execution plan, we can follow that and set up the attributes that you need. This is one of those things that when you start to embark on this journey, please feel free to contact 12D Synergy or your account manager, and we can start to get your ducks in a line and start organising how to roll out a CDE ISO 19650 configuration. Another thing to note, multiple levels of approval can be applied. This workflow is essentially customizable. It's not out of the box, hey, put a document through this process. This is something that we can develop and consult with you. So for example, if you need 3 people to approve to share, we can add 3 approved to shared states and apply those to certain roles or individuals. Similar, if you need to go to shared to approved for published, and archived. There can be multiple layers added. You can have some attribution added. All those sorts of things we can review and help guide you through. So it's a really good one there to contact us. And on that note, currently we have a few customers who are either actively piloting an ISO 19650 CDE configuration, or they're really close to start piloting themselves. They're in the process of preparing to. So keep an eye on our correspondence, because early next year we'll be hosting an online event to run through their implementation and their experience as we start to move to help more businesses ramp up their common data environment for ISO 19650. It's a brief overview. We could have spoke for an hour or two on this. We can go back and forth, but if this is something you're interested in, please, over the next few months, start to get in contact with us and we can start moving towards this sort of configuration for your business. Enjoy the rest of the Tech Forum. Thanks for joining this session. If you've got any questions, please jump in the following Q&A session. Bye.